I would like to take a moment before we get into today's main episode and to talk about my sponsor for the podcast. Podmatch is a new podcasting site dedicated to all podcasters. The platform helps hosts get connected with potential guests to appear on their show, as well as allow guests to find podcasts that will give them a chance to share their story. Podmatch offers many tools to help organize your page, from to-do lists to episode planning to potentially appearing on a leaderboard. Podmatch has it all. The best part, you have the potential to get paid. And who doesn't like to get paid from home? I like to. With an easy sign up, you can start connecting with podcasters and guests immediately. I have been a part of Podmatch since the beginning of May, and I have got to say that it was the best decision I've ever made because Podmatch helps your podcast grow. It helps you get connected with people that have very interesting, very compelling background stories that are just waiting for their story to be shared. So if you are a host or guest and would like to start building professional relationships, explore more opportunities, and have your story shared, I highly suggest that you sign up with Podmatch today by going to joinpodmatch.com/lethal venom to start expanding your network in seconds. I would like to give another huge thank you to Podmatch for sponsoring this episode. Now on to our main episode, and again, you can sign up at joinpodmatch.com/lethal venom to begin your podcasting journey today. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Lethal Venom Podcast, the show where I talk about anything I want with the honest to God truth, no lies told. Today, I am joined by Mr. John Miles. He is a transformative leader, best-selling author, and is the founder of Passion Struck, which is a global platform igniting the mattering revolution. After serving as a U.S. Navy officer and Fortune 50 executive, John dedicated his life to helping people bridge the gap between who they are and who they're meant to be. Through his award-winning Passion Struck podcast, which has over 75 million downloads, and his best-selling book, Passion Struck: 12 Powerful Principles to Unlock Your Purpose and Ignite Your Most Intentional Life, he empowers millions to live and lead with greater intention, courage, and meaning. He is also the author of his forthcoming children's book, You Matter, Luma, the first in his Mattering Verse series. It's a heartwarming story that helps children discover belonging, kindness, and the power of making others feel seen. So I would like to give a huge welcome to John. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. I cannot wait to hear your story.
No, it's so great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
So if you could just kind of do a little introduction of yourself. I kind of covered a little bit there, but kind of go into a little bit more detail about what your career's been like for you and kind of share with my audience a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, I've really had three different careers during my life. The first one started when I graduated from the Naval Academy and served as an officer in the Navy for a number of years. I ended up getting out only because I had received a appointment to become an FBI agent and had a Quantico class secured. And I think sometimes life throws us moments of trial, and this was definitely a defining moment for me because about 48 hours before I was supposed to go to that class, we started into a funding shortfall, kind of like we've been experiencing recently, where the government got shut down. And so, what I thought was a sure bet for my career ended up being a class recycle that ended up lasting over 3 years. So, that moment completely shifted my career trajectory. So I wasn't planning at that point to go into the business world, but that's exactly what happened because I had a child on the way and was married and needed to support the family. So I started in Big Four and management consulting, and then had my next big inflection point. I was um, a senior um, member of Arthur Andersen, a practice leader in the Houston office when Enron happened. And I again found myself in another significant life moment where the firm basically disappeared within a matter of 6 weeks. And so from that point, I jumped into then global business and was a senior executive at Lowe's, Dell, and other companies before about 6 years ago, deciding to pivot into what I'm doing now, which is a podcaster, author, and really life coach on transforming people's life so that they really understand what it truly means to matter and flourish.
Yeah, you've had this kind of huge transitional thing. What was the turning point that made you walk away from a traditional definition of success until kind of going into this passion for passion struck?
I think a number of us ex- realize that we're not happy doing what we're doing. We don't feel fulfilled. We don't feel like we're flourishing. And I think sometimes we end up somewhere accidentally. Other times we purposefully get there and then realize that everything we had hoped to achieve isn't what we thought it would possibly be like once we reach that point. And I think the latter is what ended up happening to me. I never expected to be a business executive because that's not where I ever thought I was going to take my career. But once I did that shift into consulting, I'm typically the type who's very driven to be the best that I can be, regardless of what it is I'm pursuing. And so I rose up the ranks very quickly. And uh, before I was 40 years old, I was the CIO of a Fortune 50 company and probably one of the top CIO jobs you could get in the world. And yet, even hitting that point as quickly as I did, I found myself at a clear gap between how I thought I was going to feel in that moment and how it actually hit me. And so I think I had the first inclination at that time, but once you're making the money and you have the lifestyle and everything that goes along with it, it's very difficult to make that pivot overnight. And so for me, what ended up happening was I felt right about that time I had been given a different calling in life to serve people who felt lonely and hopeless and helpless and broken and bored and battered, which I think billions around the world feel. But I couldn't put to it what those were symptomatic of. And so it took me doing my own journey to realize that the very people I was called to serve, I was one of them. I had become invisible in my own life in a manner, in that I had been dedicating so much of my life to this thing I called my career that I was sacrificing other meaningful parts of my life. And when I kind of woke up to the fact that I'd spent years helping other people achieve greatness, helping other people achieve money, but hadn't focused on my own passions and dreams and those connections closest to me, I really um, hit some moments of despair. And I think what woke me up out of it was my best friend committed suicide, and I remember as I was processing his death and how meaningless it was given the circumstances. It made me wake up to the fact that all our lives are finite, and what are you waiting for? There's never going to be a good moment to make this transition. So, what is taking you so long to do what you know you need to do and to pursue this calling that you were meant to pursue? And so that's kind of the backstory.
Your podcast, Passion Struck, which, as I mentioned earlier, has received more than 75 million downloads and it's reached millions worldwide. Did you ever expect to have a podcast really blow up that big to where people all around the world would be hearing your message?
Man, I never thought I was going to do a podcast in a million years. If you would have told me when I was a senior executive, would I be a podcaster someday? My answer would have been absolutely no. I wasn't accustomed to being an influencer or having a stage like this in any way. And it's not natural for me to want to get up and be an influencer in the way that I am now doing. So it was definitely for me a huge shift in my personal persona and how I was coming out in the world. And the reason I did it is I wanted to write a book about this transition that I made and the 2 years that I spent taking all the research I had done looking at other people who had broken through, who had changed their life, who had become what I now call passion struck. And I boiled it down to 12 principles that appear in the book. But before I even wanted to write the book, I needed to know that they actually worked. So I spent 2 years doing my own me search and basically taking those 12 principles and enacting them in my life. And coming out of that, I started to try to search to get a book agent so I could get the book published. And I was turned down by 80 agents. And after enough rejection, I kept hearing the same thing again and again. One, you don't have a big enough platform, which made sense because when you're working for a company like Lowe's or Dell, at least when I did, the last thing that they were concerned about was you having a personal brand. And the second thing that these book agents would constantly ask me is, how do you know anything you have to say resonates with anyone? And they were right on both accounts. I didn't have a major platform. I had none when I started. And I had no idea whether what I had to say would matter to anyone, even my dog. So at the time, it was COVID, and I couldn't go out and publicly test these on speaker stages because there weren't any. And as you probably realize yourself, when you're on a Zoom call and you've got a bunch of people there listening, there's no way you can judge their reaction to what you're saying. And so I thought that the best means to test these concepts and to start seeing if there was even remotely a chance that they would resonate with anyone was going to the best platform in the world where you can have a one-to-one relationship with people who listen to you, and that is the podcasting format. And so I think similar to any podcaster, I think you go into this very naive thinking that automatically thousands of people are going to listen to your episodes and it's going to be a huge hit. And that certainly was not the case with me. And in fact, I think I'm like the 95% who start podcasts who consider giving it up after the first 10 to 20 episodes because it's really difficult and your numbers are nowhere near where you expect them to be. And if I thought rejection from book agents was rejection, starting a podcast is an even bigger rejection when you realize how few at first listen to it. But slowly over time, I started to hone my message and get very crystal clear on the mission that I had, and a hockey stick started to happen. And 15 downloads went to 50 downloads, went to 250 downloads, went to 2,000 downloads, went to 100,000 downloads per episode over time. And so I just feel very fortunate that I'm able to serve a group of people who so desperately need to hear what the podcast is bringing them. So thank you for asking.
Yeah, I think your thought process too about wanting to quit after a certain amount of episodes is something every podcaster feels and kind of has that mentality. I actually did an interview with someone recently, and I've had multiple guests come on here and say that most podcasters stop after 5 episodes because they don't see immediate change. They don't see a huge insight of downloads. They don't see any kind of huge drive in their show, and so they kind of quit after like a very short amount of episodes because it's not boosting their, I guess, popularity. And to me, I had that same thing as well. I um had trouble at first, and then luckily after about 2 or 3 months, it started getting some traction, and I was finally able to start getting some good numbers coming in for it. So, it takes a lot to get to that point where it you feel like your podcast is not going anywhere, it's not doing anything. It takes a lot of time. You can't just give up because you're not getting an immediate download or getting 10 downloads on the first episode. There's a rare chance, and this is very rare, that a podcast blows up overnight. Um, it now it's possible, but it's kind of rare for that to happen. It it blows up over time, but I 100% agree with you about wanting to quit after 10 or 20 episodes because you just felt like it was not going anywhere, but then you kept going and it kept getting better. That's kind of the whole mentality mindset that you really need to have.
Well, I personally feel if you're trying to go into this to make money and that is your sole goal, you might as well stop now before you even get started. I remember I was talking to my friend Jordan Harbinger, who's got a huge show, bigger than mine, and I asked Jordan before I got started, what's your best advice to me about starting a podcast? He goes, don't do it. Um, and I realized looking back why he said it to me, because there's a tremendous amount of effort and commitment that you have to make to it. But I think he was also trying to say to me, you have to do it for the right reason. So the reason I got into it is I was trying to see if my message to help people would actually resonate with people. And so for me, it was an act of service more than it was ever thinking I was going to make money or anything else from the show. And I think what ends up happening is people go into it with the wrong thoughts about what they want the outcomes to be instead of the impact that they're trying to make. And so when they don't see the funds coming back, they don't see the immediate return, it's easy to walk away if you don't go into it with the right reasons.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people that's kind of the same advice I give too. You're not going to make instant money off of this, so I don't want you to think, "Oh, it's an easy job." I didn't get paid at first when I first started doing it. I get paid now, but this was like months and months of work to finally be able to start kind of getting a paycheck for it. So I don't want people to think that you're going to get money the second you start, that you're going to get hundreds and thousands of downloads the first episode. It doesn't work like that. It takes a lot of patience and time and hard work, but it does eventually add up and does actually begin to make a difference. And I think it's important to have that mindset in there. You on your show, you've had multiple conversations with a lot of thought leaders like Angela Duckworth, Susan Cain. From all the guests you've had, what is it they've really taught you about what truly drives human flourishing?
Well, I think there are a number of things, but one thing that is pretty consistent, especially when you talk to behavioral science experts, is that we often think it's the big moments in life, whether it's getting married, graduating from college, getting into the college that we want, a certain triumph that we have on the sports field that really define who we become. And what I have learned is that's not it at all. It's the micro choices that we make throughout our days that end up determining the life that we lead. And we don't think about it because any single day, depending on the person, you make 30,000 to 60,000 tiny decisions throughout the day. Most of them, you're not even present enough or conscious enough to realize you're even making them. And so the biggest thing I have learned is you have to get so intentional about realizing and reshaping your days so that you start to form a pattern that you start making more and more of the decisions or choices that are getting you in a closer alignment to where you want to be. So when I was talking to Angela, I love her book. Great. In fact, I mention it at the beginning of my own book. But I was wanting to talk to her for so many years because I thought she was missing an ingredient because her book is all about passion and perseverance. That's what grit really is. But you can have all the grit that you want in the world, but if you're not focusing it on the right things, is your life going to end up the way that you want it? So to me, whether you call it intentionality or you call it self-control, it's putting in practice that grit in service of your value system and then aligning it with your short-term ambitions and your long-term aspirations. And this is something that I've coined the bee and turtle effect. And I use this metaphor because in one case, we need to be thinking long-term like a sea turtle does, who goes very slow about their lives, but is looking at the long-term place that they want to meander to. And then you've got the working bee. And in a hive, the bee is really concentrating on what activities do I need to do in a given day to service the hive, service the queen, and be as productive as I can. And it's when you can mirror, or I guess marry the two of those together, where you take the long-term perspective of the tortoise and the short-term output of the bee, that you start perfecting this and start aligning your daily actions with those ambitions and aspirations that we all have.
What's been kind of the biggest lesson you've learned from doing the podcast and really sharing this and really focusing and doing this kind of new career path? What's been kind of some things you've learned about it?
Well, one thing I've heard time and time again is that real change doesn't happen in masses. It happens in the one-on-one moments that normally occur to us in any given day. And I remember last year I was the one MC at the Podcast Hall of Fame, and I happened to meet one of the Podcast Hall of Fame inductees. But that weekend before I went on stage, and I heard him give a talk, and he had been doing his podcast at this point for about 15 plus years. And it's a really niche podcast. He focuses on Disney World, and he tells these stories of how Disney World and Disney itself has changed so many people's lives. And he made this statement that you never know if someone has cancer who's listening, if someone is suffering um, from trauma, if someone is suffering from another illness or something else in their life, but perhaps a death. And your message on the podcast might lift that one person out in your audience who needs to hear the message that you're given. And I remember an interview I was doing with Jen Bricker Bauer. I'm not sure if any of your audience knows who she is, but Jen was born in in the former Soviet Union territories without legs, with severe disabilities, and her parents gave her up for adoption. No, Noah, do you know who she is?
I haven't heard this story, but I'm very intrigued by it.
So, so Jen gets adopted by a family in Southern Illinois who's got a bunch of fully abled sons. And this family told her from almost the moment that she could understand that anything is possible and that she could make an impact in anyone's life. And all it took for her to make an impact was showing another person that they mattered. And that if she performed a ripple of kindness to them, it could then ripple farther than she could possibly ever imagine. And so she took this feeling that there were no limitations that she couldn't surpass and employed it into her life. She wouldn't let anything get in her way. And so she became the first person who competed against able bodied people in the state championships in the state of Illinois and won the state championship in tumbling without any legs. She then became an aerialist and performed as the opening act for Britney Spears on her biggest world tour. She then wrote a book and became a New York Times bestseller. And along the way, she was looking at gymnasts who she really admired and came to the conclusion that one of them, Dominique, who was a gold medal winner, looked a lot like her. It turns out that Dominique was her birth sister. And so she got the chance to meet her birth sister. They're now, they're now friends. But what her story really showed me is that a single person who proves that anything is possible can shift so many lives, but she does it one at a time. And I think that's one of the most important things I've learned by hearing so many different stories on the podcast is it's those one-on-one relationships in the communities that we all live in where we get to make the biggest impact on any given day. And that's where it all starts.
Yeah, I love hearing stories like that from people that have kind of a troubling background, but they always end up being the ones that are the most successful. I love hearing those kinds of stories because it gives so much hope and gives so much insight to it is possible to overcome this and um make it out in the end. So you also are coming out with a book children, which is You Matter Luma. So what what kind of inspired you to kind of write a book and share this message from a kid's standpoint?
Yeah. So Noah, if I have it correctly, you graduated recently from Auburn. Is that correct?
Yes, I graduated end of December, so it's almost been a year.
Yeah. So I have a daughter who's your age. She's a senior at University of Florida. Competitors in some sense, but at least it's not the Tide, right? Um,
Yeah.
but when Olivia was in high school, um, she had a really difficult time, and what I learned going through that process was it wasn't just her who was struggling. The CDC now shows that over 40% of high schoolers are feeling persistently sad or hopeless for much of their time during high school. And I think it begins way before that. I think kids start experiencing this from what I saw from my own two kids in middle school. But by the time a child gets to middle school or high school, you've lost a pivotal moment in their life to intervene. And that is when they're young enough to truly start being influenced. And there is a huge crisis of belonging in young people today. In fact, 1 in 3 kids don't feel that they matter to their families or their communities. And the scary thing about this is it's a direct reflection of how their parents feel. Because right now, almost 60% of Americans, almost any given day, are sharing the same feelings. So, what's ended up happening is you've got more and more adults who feel like they don't matter, who feel invisible, the same thing that I felt. And then they are unknowingly, because they feel absent, they're passing that absenteeism on to their kids. And the biggest way that they're doing this is they're not present. So a child comes home from school and they're so excited to show them an art project, and the parent is barely paying attention. They're in another world, kind of just staring at the child as they're explaining how excited they are about this drawing that they created. And it only takes so many times before that child gets the message that they're not cared for in the way that they're hoping for. And so we're setting these seeds early. So I started to look at, what are some way that we can teach kids that they're fearfully and wonderfully made, and that mattering is a sacred birthright. So I decided, never thought, just as I would start a podcast, that I would ever write a children's book, but I thought, what is a way that I could start doing my part to put something out in the world where I could start creating a response to this global belonging crisis that we have, and it helps children realize how much they are seen, valued, and loved, just as God intended us all to feel. Because at the end of the day, no child should ever have to ask, "Do I matter?" and hear silence in return.
What's kind of the overall message that you would like families to kind of take away from this main passion that you have for Passion Struck, and what you would really like people to know about your mission?
Yeah, I think one of the key things is that our fundamental need to matter isn't something that we earn, it's something we have to awaken in ourselves and in others. And I think that there is this kind of equation that ends up happening. You have to feel like you matter to yourself in order to make someone else, in order to make someone else feel like they matter. But if you're not hearing it from other people telling you that you matter, you're not having that reinforcement created. So, what we need to do is to repair these bonds that we have walked away from over the past 15 to 20 years as digital means have infiltrated so much of our lives, and we've abandoned much of the communities that were where we felt the most loved and valued, and have given up on in so many ways. So what I'm really trying to do is to get people back into the importance of these communities, the importance of the relationships that we have. I mean, no, I don't even know if you know this, but 1 in 7 men throughout the world don't have a close friend. And I think we are spending so much time trying to be strong that we're not allowing ourselves to have the vulnerability that we need um, to get the fundamental needs met of belonging, courage, and compassion from the people that we're interacting with. So that's what I hope people will take away from this is that we all have a fundamental needs to matter to ourselves, to others, and to share that amongst our communities and our friends and our families.
What's kind of some future goals that you have for the company? Do you have kind of any future missions, kind of any bucket list projects that you have working on that you would like to potentially and eventually um get to later in life?
Yeah, I have a another book that I've got coming out next year in October. The working title right now is The Mattering Effect. But this is, I think there have been a lot of different books out there, whether it was Robert Putnam's Bowling Alone, which kind of set the standard for what society is experiencing today, or more recently, Jonathan Haidt wrote The Anxious Generation and other books before that. I think they've laid out what's happening, but I don't think anyone has laid out how do you fix it. So the mattering effect really systematically goes through and puts a framework in place for how do you restore mattering um, personally, and then how do you build it back in your relationships, in your family units, in your communities, in your workplaces, and then across society. So I'm very excited for that book to come out next year because I'm kind of trying to hit this at both a child level through You Matter Luma and then through an adult level through that book. But I'm also in the process of launching the Mattering Verse, which for people to put some substance behind this, it's kind of like a Pixar-like environment, but focused on mattering. So my hope is for children, it's not only the books, but in the future, it will be movies, shows, animated features, comic books, even stuffed animals that and other things like that, all surrounded around this idea of mattering. And for adults, it will be podcast, speaking opportunities, educational content, more books, etc., to make this become alive for adults. So the way we're going about that is we've started a speakers bureau, Passion Struck Speakers, a podcast network, the Passion Struck Network, and then a live events company, Passion Struck Live. So the whole idea is to make the Mattering Verse come alive for both adults and children across the world.
I think it's a great mission that you have going on. I think it's really important to know um this thing, and I think it's really important. And I also love Pixar, so Pixar is right up my alley. So um I know that a lot of people are gonna really like that. If you hadn't have, because before you went down this road, you worked as a U.S. Navy officer, and then you were a Fortune 50 executive. If you hadn't have switched from those careers into doing this new career, do you think you would be at the same level of success if you had stayed at your previous job?
Well, no, I think you're asking the wrong question. So would I have been making probably more money than I'm making now? I probably would have made more money if I would have stayed in my previous role. But that's hard to say. But I think I look at success completely differently now. When I think of human flourishing, I think of, do I wake up in the morning excited to tackle the day? Do I feel completely um, alive about the mission that I've been called to solve, and do I want to get out of bed every day to do it? And so for me, the answer to that is a resounding yes. I feel more purpose, more satisfaction, more energy than I have in years. And to me, that's the most important thing, because when I look back on my life, is it going to matter if I had another BMW to drive, or that I lived in this house versus that house? No. Will it matter to me that perhaps I saved someone from committing suicide because I delivered the message that they needed to hear at that moment in time, that I see them and that I'm here to help them? That's what I hope my legacy will be more about. So I am so thankful at this point that I'm down this direction that I am. And I hope that my friend Tim didn't give his life in vain, and that that wake up call that I got from seeing, my friend die, and to take on this mission to help others and to try to prevent so many more people from taking that same step he took, because he didn't feel seen and loved in his own life, that his life isn't in vain, and that I'm doing something that honors him every single day. So that's how I would look at success. And I think so many of us need to redefine what success is, because I can tell you what I found is the time that I was making the most money, had the loftiest titles, had the most prestige in my life, were some of the loneliest and most miserable I've ever experienced. And that is something that for your younger audience, I hope they're shaping their lives differently and with different goals than what I did when I was your age.
I think that hearing your story is really impactful and will raise questions in people of how they can really change for the better. I think it's something that's really important for people to know about. And, I gotta really give you credit for that, because it's hard to start a new career later in life after you've done so much. There's always that fear that, oh, am I doing this for the right reason? Is this the right choice I made? Do I regret leaving my previous career in suit for this? But I think you've made a really good name for yourself. You've had a really huge success with it. Um, if you could leave my listeners with one challenge that they can do today, um, it's like, or some kind of start mattering more to themselves and others, what would that challenge be?
So my episode tomorrow on my show is with a gentleman named Elias Wise Friedman, or as millions know him as the Doggist. I'm not sure if you've ever seen him on Instagram, but he's got like 11 million followers. And he himself was in this, I think it was a marketing or advertising job, and just wasn't feeling fulfilled with it. So he started to go down this path that he was going to start taking photographs of dogs and of their owners. And he has now done over 50,000 of them. And when I had this discussion with them, I had no idea that this whole discussion about dogs was really going to be about mattering. And um, sometimes I think dogs are one of the best forms, or any pet that we have, of realizing just how much we matter to other creatures. I think all you have to do is turn off the damn TV when your dogs are sitting there staring at you, and spend 15 minutes on the ground with them as they're curled up in your laps, looking at you like you're the only thing on this planet who matters a darn thing in the world. And it gives you a different perspective on life. So, if there was one bit of advice I would have, is to put down your darn phone, turn off the damn TV, sit in silence for a little bit with your pets, and just love them the way that you want to be loved, and feel their warmth, and them reciprocating how much uh, love that they have for you. Because all you have to do is look at a pet who loves you to realize that you're the only thing in this world that matters to them. And it's the same thing as your child who's looking at you, who needs the same support. And I would just say one other thing. When I was at Lowe's, one of my really good friends was even more senior than I was. He had like 30,000 employees and was the model executive that I think we would all hope we would work for. He was the guy who knew every single person's name, the names of everyone's spouse, their kids, their activities. But he was investing so much in his day job that by the time he got home, there was nothing left, to the point that his kids um, went to Lowe's and bought a brick and painted it and started putting it in front of him to be a reminder that anytime they put the brick in front of him, it meant that he wasn't being present around them. And it really reshaped his whole awareness and value system. So whether it's your pet or you go out and you buy a brick and put it in front of your parents if they're not paying attention to you, it's take back your life from all of the different things that are subconsciously pulling you away. Because what we have become is a bunch of pinballs bouncing off all the distractions in the game, and we've forgotten how to play it anymore. And we need to get back, so many of us, to mastering being the architect of the game instead of being the ball who's being played by the architect.
Well, John, I have appreciated you so much for coming on here and sharing um, sharing your story and sharing the message that you're really wanting people to know about. As I had said, I think it's really important to know and really inspiring to hear and see where you've come from and the success that you've gotten from this passion struck message. If people want to learn more about you and they would like to support the podcast and the books that you have coming out, where all are they available at, and where can people follow you as well to keep updates about future um events, updates that you have going on, or for future books, or just places where they can stay up to date with you?
So I'm going to give them four destinations they can go to. The first is my personal website, John, middle initial R, miles.com. Second place they could go is the company website, passionstruck.com. If they want to learn more about the children's book, the best place to go is youmatterluma.com. And if they're interested in being part of the community and part of our weekly posts and notes, they can follow me on Substack at theignitedlife.net.
Alrighty, well, I will put all his links in the description box below. I'll put his personal website, the Passion Strike website, as well as the website for his upcoming children's book, You Matter Luma, down there, so that if you feel free to check any of those out. And I'll also put his Substack down there, as well as his other socials down there, so where you can follow him and support him anywhere. And I'll also put links to the podcast down there. So there'll be a lot of links down there for you guys to check out and see from him. Feel free to check any of those out to learn more about him. To feel free to follow the show and podcast on social media as well. I'm on Instagram and TikTok at Lethal Venom Podcast, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at Noah's Podcast. And Lethal Venom is available wherever you get your podcast from. Feel free to listen to it on any of the major platforms: Spotify, Apple, Amazon, iHeartRadio, YouTube, Pandora. It's everywhere, so feel free to subscribe so you get notified of when new episodes come out. Also, feel free to also leave good reviews and ratings as well, as it helps boost the podcast up there a little bit. It's not necessary and mandatory, but it's well deserved and needed, and appreciative. Thank you to everyone for tuning in today's episode. Hope you all enjoyed it. Yeah, all have a great rest of your day. Be safe, and I'll see you all in the next episode of Lethal Venom.